You've been here before. Even if everything feels new, strange, even painful, you already knew this place. There, on the other side of the veil, where time doesn't exist, your essence shone like a silent star, conscious, awake. You saw the earth from afar, like someone watching a stage. A vibrant scene, full of challenges, encounters, choices, and forgetfulness. And then, something called you. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a duty. It was a yes. Silent, deep, powerful. You looked at what was to come. The joys and the wounds. The bonds and the losses. The laughter and the pain. And even knowing you would forget it all, you chose to come down. Because your soul knew. It knew there's something that can only be learned with feet on the ground and a wounded heart. It knew that light needs to know shadow in order to become whole. And so, you approached the veil, the point between worlds. There, where memories fade so that experiences can become real. You took a deep breath, not with lungs, but with presence, and said, I accept to forget, so I can remember again with truth. You chose to come, not because it was easy, but because it was essential. Earth is not a punishment. It's an invitation, a school for courageous souls. And you, yes, answered that call. Before the first cry, before the first human touch, you had already crossed portals of light. You had already made silent agreements with other souls. You had already set intentions without guarantees. Because here, certainty dissolves so that freedom can bloom. And even if now you don't remember any of this, even if your mind doubts or laughs or closes up, deep down, something in you recognizes, feels, echoes, trembles. Because the moment of remembrance doesn't come with noise. It arrives like a gentle whisper in the midst of chaos. And if you're hearing this now, maybe you're closer than you think. You may not remember, but you chose this life. And maybe now you're wondering, why would I choose to go through this? Why this family? Why this body? Why so much pain? The answer isn't in punishment. It isn't in some debt. It lies in growth. Your soul wasn't seeking comfort. It was seeking depth. It wanted to feel the human experience in all its colors, even the darkest ones, because it knew that it's in the darkness that light gains meaning. You chose your challenges, not as punishment, but as stepping stones. Each obstacle, an opportunity to remember who you are beyond form. Each difficult relationship, a mirror. Each loss, a crack through which the light enters. And yes, you chose your family. Even if it feels impossible. Even if the relationship was hard, or distant, or full of open wounds. But it was with those souls that you made agreements. Silent agreements, before time began. You will show me abandonment, and I will learn to nourish myself from within. You will teach me boundaries, and I will discover the courage to say no. You will deny me love, and I will be forced to find it again in myself. None of this was imposed. They were choices, sometimes difficult, sometimes risky, but always with a greater purpose. And as for the body, you chose this one too. With its shape, its pain, its power. Your body is not a mistake. It is a sacred instrument, the perfect garment for the role you came here to play. Maybe it challenges you. Maybe it carries ancestral memories. Maybe it's the place where you judge yourself the most. But it's in this body that your soul chose to dwell. For a reason only time can reveal. That too was part of the plan. You were born exactly when you needed to be. At a moment in history that resonates with what your soul came to transform. You came with a map. Not a rigid script, but a field of possibilities. A garden where every choice is a seed. Some take root, others don't. And that's okay. Free will has always been part of the agreement. Even though you mapped out paths, you could stray from them. Even though you had intuitions, you could ignore them. Even though you had soul agreements, you could postpone them. Because life isn't a track. It's a river. And the soul learns even when it gets lost. Sometimes, it learns even more. But make no mistake, nothing you live is meaningless. Every encounter, every silence, every absurd coincidence. It's all part of something greater than the mind can grasp. You didn't come here to win. You came here to remember. And remembering doesn't come through victories, but through the falls. Through the moments when everything collapses. And you realize that what's left was you all along. So why did you choose this life? Because you are stronger than you think, wiser than you believe, older than you can remember. And the life you live now is the answer to a request your soul made. When it was still on the other side, looking at Earth as if staring into a moving mirror, you came to love, to lose, to fall, to rise, to forget, to seek, and in the midst of it all, to remember. You knew you would forget. You knew that by crossing the veil, everything that was once clear would become a fog. That the wisdom you had gathered would turn into whispered intuition. That the reasons why would get lost in the noise of the world. And still you came, because forgetting was part of the plan. True learning doesn't come from certainty. It comes from the search, from the stumbling, from the moment you ask, "Who am I?" and find no ready answer. Before you were born, you made an agreement. A deep agreement with time, with the body, with the world. A silent pact with forgetting. I will forget, so I can feel everything as if it were the first time. I will forget, so the reunion with myself can be authentic. I will forget not to live by knowing, but by choosing. The veil of forgetting is not a punishment. It is a gift, because only those who forget can rediscover with the heart. And that's how it all began. The body was formed. The mind began to take shape, not with soul memories, but with earth's stimuli. Words, rules, fears. And your essence grew quiet. Not lost. Just asleep. You learned your name. You learned who you were supposed to be. You learned what you were expected to do. But no one taught you to remember that behind the roles, there was a soul. And that's if it was ancient, radiant, while the world shaped yourself. The soul waited, patiently, because it knew. One day, at some moment, something would happen. A meeting, a pain, a question. And the remembering would begin to surface. At first shy, like a light breeze on a heavy day. Then stronger, like a longing you can't explain. Like a wordless calling. Because despite the forgetting, the soul never stopped whispering. And if today you feel that calling, if something inside you longs for more than routine and survival, it's because the pact of forgetting is beginning to dissolve. You are remembering. You were born pure, still carrying traces of the light from where you came. But soon, the world began to teach you, to mold, to adjust, to fit in, behave, dress like this, speak this way, be what's expected of you. And little by little, the remembering was muffled. You learned to please before you felt, to obey before you questioned, to compete before you listened to yourself. Not because it was wrong, but because that's how the system was designed, to make you forget who you are. You were placed inside invisible structures, inherited beliefs, old models, fears carefully passed down from generation to generation. Don't dream so much. Work hard to become someone. Don't question. Don't feel so deeply. And so, you adapted. You learned that success meant climbing an endless ladder. That happiness was always somewhere later. That love required approval. And that your essence was too dangerous to show. The world offered you masks. And you, wanting to belong, accepted them. To be a good student. The ideal child. Attractive. Productive. Controlled. Normal. But the price was high. The soul, which once whispered clearly, began to scream in silence. In nameless aches. In sleepless nights. In an anguish that can't be explained. Because deep inside, something knew it was drifting away. The system is subtle. It doesn't bind you with chains. It binds you with ideas, with promises, with comparisons. It tells you who to be. And if you dare to be different, it calls you crazy, naive. But what if the real failure is fitting in so well that you lose yourself? What if everything they told you was the path is actually the detour? You didn't come here to repeat patterns. You came to break them, not with anger, but with presence, with clarity, with soul. This world may try to shape you, but it will never have access to what exists behind your eyes, to what pulses when no one is watching, to what calls you in the quietest hours of the night. The disconnection you feel is a reminder, not that something is wrong with you, but that something is wrong with what you were taught to be. And the first step to remembering who you are is to begin questioning everything you were told you should be. Even under the weight of forgetting, even immersed in the demands of the world, the soul was never completely silent. It always left signs, clues hidden in the folds of the everyday. They were small, sometimes subtle, but as real as the beating of your own heart. Have you ever felt something you couldn't explain? A sudden intuition, a chill with no reason, a certainty without logic. That was it. The soul, trying to help you remember. Remembering doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in, through the crack of a meeting, through the gaze of a stranger who feels too familiar, through the feeling that you've lived that moment before. The déjà vus? They're echoes of other lives, other versions of you. Traces of the soul crossing the mind's linear time. They're not glitches in reality. They're reminders that it's wider than it seems. And those dreams that feel more real than waking life? The ones where you fly, talk to those who've passed, or feel a deep longing for a place you've never known. They're soul journeys, timeless encounters, calls for you to remember that you are not just this body, not just this name. Have you ever fallen in love with something for no reason? A culture, a song, a language, a landscape? Without ever having experienced it in this life? Maybe you did in another. Maybe your soul left a piece of itself there, and now it wants to return. And the fears? The ones that make no sense, that have no clear origin. A deep fear of the ocean, of fire, of being alone. Those too may be traces, memories not stored in the mind, but in the soul. It remembers everything. It feels everything. Even if you can't explain it, you feel it. And when you meet someone and feel in the very first moment that you already knew them, that there's an invisible bond, that's no coincidence. They are soul reunions, ancient bonds finding new form, because certain connections don't begin, they simply continue. These signs are not fantasies. They are messages, invitations, bridges between what you forgot and what is ready to be remembered. And the more you listen, The more they appear, the more you trust, the clearer they become. The soul has a gentle urgency. It never shouts. But when you finally become still, it sings. Listen to your body when it tenses for no reason. Listen to your heart when it races in the face of the unseen. Listen to your silence when it feels too full. The soul's memory doesn't come from the mind. It comes from truth. And truth always finds a way back. Even when everything feels like noise, she's there, inside you, silent, attentive, loving. Your soul inhabits you like someone watching from the window. She doesn't command, she whispers. She doesn't demand, she waits. But it hurts. It hurts when she sees you lose yourself, when she watches you trying to fit into molds that were never shaped for you, when she sees you suffocate your own essence just to belong. The soul feels. She feels it when you say yes, but want to say no. She feels it when you swallow the cry, the scream, the desire. She feels it when you ignore that subtle nudge that said, "Go this way," but you were afraid, or unsure, or thought it was just your imagination. It wasn't. She tries to speak to you all the time, in the fatigue with no cause, in the tear that falls for no reason, in the sudden joy that can't be explained, in the restlessness that shows up when everything seems fine. Because what we call a symptom is sometimes just the soul saying, "I'm here, and this isn't you." When you lie to please, when you pretend to belong, when you forget yourself to be accepted, the soul feels it, and she suffers. But she never abandons you. Never. She only watches patiently, waiting for the moment when you'll get tired of the mask, waiting for the instant when you'll look inward and ask, "Is anyone there?" And she will answer, not with words, but with a peace you'd forgotten existed, with a gentle warmth like a hug from within, with a sense of relief, as if finally you had come home, because you were never alone. You were only disconnected. The body is the temple, but the soul is the flame burning within it. And what she wants most is for you to dance with her again, with lightness, with truth, with presence. The dialogue was never broken. You had just stopped listening. Sometimes it all starts with an emptiness, with that strange feeling that something is missing, even when, on the surface, everything seems in place. You look around and no longer recognize yourself. Conversations feel shallow, routines mechanical, goals soulless. It's as if the world has lost its color, and you can't explain why. But that's the first sign, not of an end, but of a beginning. Because when everything stops making sense, it's because something within you has started to remember. Awakening isn't as pretty as in the movies. It doesn't come with lights or bells. It comes with crisis, with doubt, with loss. Sometimes it's an illness, a layoff, a grief, a breakup. Doors close, and you feel like you're falling into darkness. But there, in the dark, without distractions, without certainties, without masks, the soul can finally speak. And she asks you, is this really who you want to keep being? Or are you ready to return to who you truly are? Awakening is messy, because it's the moment when everything you've built starts to crumble, not out of cruelty, but because it was built far from your truth. And the soul can no longer stand living only in the background. She begins to push, to pull, to disturb. You feel the urge to withdraw, to be silent, to say no without guilt, to ask strange questions like, what am I doing here? What is my place in the world? And no one seems to have the answer, because it isn't out there. It's in you. It always was. Awakening can also be sweet. It can come with a song, with a book that arrives at just the right time, with a gaze that pierces through you, with a conversation that awakens memories you never lived. They're the invisible threads pulling you back to your center, to your inner home, to the place where your soul waits, arms open, without judgment, without hurry. And you realize you weren't lost. You were just numb. Awakening is an invitation to live with more truth, more presence, more soul. You begin to question what you consume, what you say, what you think, who you choose to keep close. The spiritual search begins, not as an escape, but as a return. You open to the invisible, to the subtle, to what can't be proven, but is deeply felt. And little by little, the remembering returns, not as memories of dates and facts, but as a deep inner knowing that you are more than you were told, that there is a greater force, and it speaks to you from within. The crises pass, but they leave space for the soul to breathe, space for you to live differently. You begin to move in a new way, not to please, not to conquer, but to express what you came to offer the world. And in that moment, you become dangerous to the system and precious to humanity, because an awakened soul is a flame lit in the middle of the darkness. And what if you remember? What if, instead of staying asleep, you choose to open your eyes? Not the ones on your face, but the ones of your soul. Everything changes, not on the outside, but on the inside. Life still moves in cycles. The days continue, the bills, the seasons, the encounters, but something in you is no longer the same. You begin to live with lightness, not because everything has become easy, but because you no longer resist so much. You stop running, stop comparing, stop seeking approval in empty stares, and you begin to simply be, with presence, with purpose, with peace. The pain doesn't vanish, but now you understand it. You know it too has something to reveal. The doubts don't disappear, but you learn to walk even without all the answers. Fear still whispers, but it no longer leads, because when you remember that everything here is temporary, that the body is a passage, that roles are fleeting, and the soul is eternal. You begin to choose differently. You speak with more truth, love with more surrender, listen with more depth. You no longer need to prove anything, or defeat anyone, or carry burdens that were never yours. You move with intention, with coherence, with beauty, and you realize you didn't come here to be better than anyone. You came to be whole, to live the plan your soul designed, with freedom. And the most beautiful part? You begin to inspire others, not with speeches, but with presence, because a soul remembering itself awakens others who were just waiting for a touch, gesture, a living example that it's possible. To remember is to become free, not from responsibility, but from illusion. And when you remember, life stops being a burden and becomes a dance. You didn't arrive here by accident. You didn't hear these words by coincidence. You didn't feel this calling because you're imagining things. You heard it because you're ready. Maybe not completely, maybe still afraid, but ready enough to take the next step. And the next step is not external. It doesn't involve achievements or big decisions. It's a step inward, a gentle dive, a chosen silence, because the soul doesn't shout. It invites, softly, with love. You don't need to understand everything right now. You don't need to be perfect or enlightened. You just need to say, just I'm here. I want to remember. I'm willing to come back to myself. That is the portal. Remembering begins with the willingness to listen. And once you listen, the path reveals itself. Not completely, but enough for the next step. Don't expect a flash of light. Expect a whisper, a peace that arrives slowly, like someone recognizing home after a long time away. The soul doesn't push. It touches. It guides. It waits. And now, she's looking at you with the eyes of the heart. Can you feel it? Then close your eyes. Breathe. Allow it. And remember, everything you're searching for out there is already within you. You don't need to find your soul. You just need to stop running from her.